In 2004, according to the Washington Post, the FISA court approved 18,748 warrants and rejected 5. 18,748 warrants, rejected 5. The FISA court has sided with the executive 99.9% of the time. Isn't that enough? Is anything lacking? Isn't the framework already in place? Isn't all of this enough to keep us safe? We all know, Mr. President, the President's answer to that. Given this complex, fine-tuned machinery crafted over 3 decades by all 3 branches, what did he do? He ignored it. He ignored it. Given a system primed to bless nearly every eavesdropping he could conceive of, he conducted his own little illegality. If the shock of that decision has yet to sink in, think of it this way. President Bush ignored not just a federal court, but a secret federal court, not just a secret federal court, but a secret federal court prepared to sign off on his actions 99.9% of the time. A more compliant court has never been conceived. And still that wasn't good enough for this president or his allies. And so I'll ask the Senate candidly, and candidly it already knows the answer. Is this about our security, or is it about his power? I ask that question not to change the subject, but because it is key to understanding why this administration is pushing so hard for telecom immunity. That is, for secrecy. Richard Nixon, the same man who declared that if the president does it, it's not illegal. That's a quote from him, by the way. Raised secrecy to an art form because he understood that the surest way to amass power is to conceal its true extent. Secrecy can spring from the best motives, but as it grows, it begins to exist only for itself, only for its own sake, only to cover its own abuses. The senators of the Church Commission expressed succinctly the deep flaw in that form of government. Abuse thrives on secrecy. Today, we have the executive branch pass a new master of secrecy. Vice President Cheney practices a secrecy so baroque that it could, in a less threatened time, be almost the object of laughter instead of fear. His classified papers stamped, unclassified papers stamped as TSSCI, one of the highest levels of state secret. The list of papers he has disclassified, that's classified, of course. The members of his energy task force, none of your business. His location, undisclosed. The name of his staff, confidential. And tellingly, of course, except in the visitor log of his office, shredded by the Secret Service. When secrecy becomes this divorced from practicality, we are left with only one conclusion. For this executive branch, secrecy is power. Of course, I don't mean to offend, don't mean any offense against our Vice President, but as he reminds us, of course, he's not part of the executive branch at all. So, Mr. President, we see a pattern of secrecy stretching back to the first months of this administration. Its push for immunity is no different. Secrecy is at its center. And tellingly, the administration's original immunity proposal protected not just the telecoms, but everyone involved in the wiretapping program. And their original proposal, that is, they wanted to immunize themselves. Think about that. It speaks to their fear and perhaps their guilt. Their guilt that they had broken the law, their fear that in the years to come, they would be found liable or convicted. They knew better than anyone else what they had done, and they must have had good reason to be afraid. Thankfully, executive community is not part of the bill before us, and I'm grateful for that. But the origin of immunity tells us a great deal about what's at stake here. That is, and always has been, a self-preservation bill. Otherwise, why not have the trial and get over with it? If the president's allies believe as what they say, the corporations would win in a walk. After all, look at the things from their perspective. And they're telling, when our biggest telecom corporations helped the president spy without a warrant, they were doing their patriotic duty. When they listened to the executive branch and turned over private information, they were doing their patriotic duty. When one company gave NSA rather, a secret eavesdropping room in its own corporate headquarters, it was simply doing its patriotic duty. The president asked, the telecoms answered. Well, shouldn't that be easy to prove, Mr. President? The corporations only need to show a judge the authority and the assurances they were given, and they'll be in and out of court in 5 minutes. If the telecoms are as defensible as the president says, why doesn't the president let them defend themselves? If the case is so easy to make, why doesn't he let them make it? Why is he standing in the way?